tonight's Green Report, we go to the North Pole, where a rapidly vanishing sea ice over the Arctic Ocean is causing some very, very deep worry among climate scientists. Turns out that 9/11 this past week wasn't just the 11th anniversary of a terrible crime. It's the day that sea ice in the Arctic reached its smallest, thinnest level, a level of sea ice that's referred to by scientists as the sea ice extent. The 9 years when the sea ice extent was lowest, when there was the least sea ice over the Arctic Ocean, just happened to be the last 9 years. In other words, we are full-blown into a massive change in the Arctic, and we ignore it or misunderstand it at considerable peril to ourselves and our future on this planet. Here to help us fill us in on what's going on up north, why, and what it could mean for us all is Mary Nicol, Senior Arctic Campaigner with Greenpeace. Mary, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for joining us. First off, why should we care about how much ice is in the Arctic?
Well, polar snow and ice play a critical role in helping to limit global warming pollution. So when the ice is minimized and no longer as present, what happens is instead of being reflected back directly into space, which 80% of the light that does hit ice is reflected back, it then goes into the ocean and then contributes to overall warming of our planet.
So the number one consequence that we should be concerned of is the difference in the albedo effect, the reflectivity of the north, that this is the beginning of basically a positive feedback loop where instead of reflecting light and heat, we're now absorbing light and heat, which will then speed up the rate at which the ice is melting. Do I have that right?
That's exactly right, and it's a catastrophic impact of climate change that we're already seeing. And instead of, taking action and trying to stop impacts like this one, President Obama right now has allowed Shell to, because the ice cover is no longer as present, drill for oil off the coast of Alaska.
Yeah. What does this say about where we are in the arc of global warming? Apparently we have passed the tipping point of an ice-free Arctic, or have we?
Yeah, so certainly over the past several decades, since there's been measurements of this area, there is definitely a downward trend. But the great thing is just when the announcement was made that we've reached the lowest tipping point, there was a coalition of environmentalists and impacted communities from Alaska down to the Gulf of Mexico who were outside the White House calling on President Obama to stop public leasing of fossil fuels on public lands. The solutions are there. They're right at the edge of our fingertips. And certainly, we're looking to the president and other world leaders, especially as we head into Paris this winter for the international climate talks, to take the melting Arctic as a dire warning that it is, and to take some significant action to curb our overall emissions globally.
How is the rest of the Arctic? I mean, it's not all just the Arctic Sea. We've got the northern part of North America and Asia. How is the rest of the Arctic being affected by this melting permafrost, changing ecosystems, that sort of thing?
Yeah, and we're just starting. Scientists are really just starting to learn more and more about the impacts. That's one of the things that is scary about this, is because never in the course of human history have we had these same cycles starting to happen. So there's more and more science that's coming out about the impact of the fresh water that's melted from glaciers and the impact that could have on ocean currents globally, and changing the temperatures for us down further south, but as well as different diseases and whatnot that are being released because of the melting permafrost.
What's the situation with under ice methane, the frozen methane clathrate or methane hydrate crystals in the Arctic, and what would an ice-free Arctic mean for the release of that powerful greenhouse gas?
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert on that particular question, but it is, the main thing that we're trying to make clear is that we know that these feedback loops are starting to become more and more common. And so the safest thing for us to do is to, switch to alternatives that limit the amount of greenhouse gases and give us the greatest chance for survival and greatest chance to pass on a planet like the one we know to our grandchildren.
Yeah. What's the status of the Shell Arctic drilling efforts right now, and what's Greenpeace doing about all this?
Yeah. So the status right now is that they're getting to the end of their drilling season, which the Obama administration has approved. And so we are looking to the Obama administration to, cancel their any upcoming leases that they may give to oil companies like Shell, and then as well as to really make sure that the regulations are in place to make sure Shell is towing the line. But right now, the administration has given them the green light up to drill for oil up in Alaska, but as well as drill for oil and get to coal and gas and other public lands across the country. So we're joining with thousands of other Americans who are asking the president to really look for solutions and not to take the sea ice minimum and take advantage of it, but really look at transitioning the way that we get our energy and power our economy.
Right. I realize you're not a climate scientist. I've talked to several on this program recently who have suggested that as the sea ice disintegrates, the jet stream is apparently being negatively affected by that. And as the jet stream is being broken up, basically, or weakened, we're getting these wild winters here on the East Coast, drought on the West Coast. But it's not happening just in the United States. It's happening all over the world. Europe is getting wild weather. Asia's getting wild weather. Russia's getting wild weather, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, it seems. Is there a growing international consensus that we've got to, in part as a consequence of the way that the weather's going crazy, that we've got to do something about this burning of fossil fuels in the minute we have left here, Mary?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, the science is becoming more and more clear of the catastrophic impacts that we are facing, from, villages off the coast of Alaska whose buildings are literally following into the ocean, to wildfires and droughts that we're seeing in other places in the globe. And so we've seen some exciting thing, like the president of China and President Obama coming together to make a commitment to reduce global emissions. And so we're really looking to world leaders, this Paris, as well as climate activists across the globe, to take significant action and solve this problem, because it's something that impacts all of us.
Yeah, this really and truly does have to be an international effort, and Greenpeace International is doing wonderful work in that regard, as well as Greenpeace USA. Mary Nicol, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Tom.